Welcome to Fireside Giants. My name is Alex, with my co-host here, Anthony the Great Rivardo. Today we're talking team accolades for the New York Giants from the 2020 season. Team MVP, most overrated, most underrated, the biggest disappointment, and the most improved. There's a lot of players we have to go through. Anthony and I had some differing opinions, so we'll have some back and forths regarding that. Get you guys some good quality content, of course. But before we dive into these players and what to expect from them in 2021, and why we settled on the grades that we did, Anthony, my friend, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I got my Joe Judge sweater on, the Joe Judge fan club represent. I am the leader of the Joe Judge fan club, as everybody in the Discord channel has agreed that I am the leader, and that has been a unanimous decision. So I'm ready to talk about the Giants, ready to talk about Joe Judge, the team MVP, just to get started and go right into the video. My team MVP, Joe Judge. Look at how he changed the culture. The second that he walked in here, he just changed the feeling that we all had about the New York Giants. We were all very disappointed, very down over what we've seen over the past couple of years. And maybe some fans still are, but we still have hope now. Now we have hope. We didn't have this hope until Joe Judge got here. He had that introductory press conference that we'll never forget. He just changed the entire feeling that we had around the organization. And really, in year one, we saw him do a lot of really great things. It wasn't perfect. He had a couple flaws here and there, but for the most part, he really just fixed the culture of the New York Giants and set down a really nice foundation, which was his mission. That's what he said. His year one goal, lay the foundation. Then we'll build on that next year. And that's what we're going to do next year. We're going to see Joe Judge build with the team. Hopefully they, sign some players or draft some players on offense so that they can build with. And then year two, start to build that house and build that framework. But right now, I think he did an amazing job just laying down the foundation. And for me, he was the most valuable person, maybe not most valuable player because he's not a player, but he was definitely the MVP in my eyes in terms of what he did to change the New York Giants.
Yeah, I mean, that's totally reasonable. And I'm just going to be the devil's advocate, for when it comes to Joe Judge. And of course, I love Joe Judge. I think he's been fantastic for the Giants. I think he did a lot of great things, especially when it came to handling adversity early on in his career with Big Blue. Of course, you have the DeAndre Baker situation right off the bat. You have COVID, no preseason, new faces, new coaching staff, a draft with a GM that, has really bombed the first two. So now, this past draft looked a lot better. But, I give a lot of credit to Joe Judge and the coaching staff. They did a phenomenal job. But as devil's advocate, I'm going to look at some things that might be, negatives towards Joe Judge. Maybe the fact that they were 6-10. I don't think that's enough. They have to be a better football team, especially if they're adding a 17th game in 2021. They need to win more than 9 games, right? They need to be a 10-win team in 2021. That's just a necessity if we want to see them take that step forward. He did make some really poor in-game decisions at times that Anthony and I always disagree on this one, but the punter throwing to the center play was use Sterling Shepard in the red zone. That is what you have a guy like him for. He is your primary red zone threat. He made some really strange decisions. Overall, I didn't think it was too bad. He didn't really make too many bad decisions. His time management was good. His in-game decision was good. He hyped his players up. He helped specific groupings that needed the assistance. Of course, you had the Mark Colombo situation. He dealt with that pretty well. But again, the con to that is maybe they shouldn't have tried to create that animosity within their own coaching staff so early on, halfway through the year. Give him a little bit more time. The offensive line was making some progress. Maybe that was a sign that, he doesn't get along with his coaches very well. I'm playing devil's advocate, by the way, so I'm just trying to be the guy that, is kind of like an ass right now.
Bro, you're trying to get booted from the Joe Judge fan club. As a leader, I can absolutely kick you out of the Joe Judge fan club and remove your high position within the fan club. And if you keep dissing my boy Joe Judge like this, you'll get removed. I'm just kidding, because I know everybody likes to hear unbiased, analysis, and I'm obviously a little biased with Joe Judge because I just love the guy. But you're right, he wasn't perfect, and there was a couple of times where he called a timeout or didn't call a timeout, and I had a little gripe with that. But really, overall, though, as a rookie head coach, compare him to Pat Shurmur, who wasn't a rookie head coach. His time management was way better than Pat Shurmur, which is very surprising, that he came in instantly. Well, not really surprising. I knew he would, but it's very impressive that he came in and already had better time management than our last head coach. And probably even the head coach before that, Ben McAdoo, made some really interesting decisions in the past. So, and then in terms of the leadership, the Giants needed this leader. Pat Shurmur, I hate to just keep bagging on that guy, but like he was so boring to listen to. The players,
He
they
wasn't a
came out
leader.
afterwards. They said that they hated him, and he just was not a leader. Now we have a leader who laid down some great foundation for the Giants to build on, as I said. And I think that it wasn't perfect. We only won 6-10. We need to be better than that if we want to actually crown Joe Judge the king of New York. But he's done a really good job so far. This is a team that really needs to continue to build this roster. But once it does, I'm really confident that Joe Judge will continue to be the team MVP and will lead us down the right path into the right direction and hopefully into the promised land.
Absolutely. I mean, Joe Judge did have one really funny quote that he said during a game. I posted it on my Twitter, so go check it out. The link to my Twitter is above on YouTube. It's really funny. He literally yells at the referee. He goes, "If this was a Catholic school, Dan, that dude would have been thrown out." So he's cracking jokes in game. I love his energy. You hear how he kind of looks at individual players and he tries to hype them up. He tries to give them help, assistance, advice. He talks to his captains, like a good coach should, very communicative and bouncing ideas off each other, whether to do this, whether to do that. He is a football guy, he's like if you've ever played backyard football with like your friends and their dads and stuff, like he's one of the dads. You know what I mean? Like he's one of the guys who's playing quarterback, the dad who's playing quarterback. Like he's very much like a football guy. He's just traditional. And I like that about him. I like how he very much sees this as a family, but he also holds his family members accountable. That's the big thing. Nobody gets a free pass. In the family, if someone's messing up, you're held accountable. No one's looking past it. So I like how he took that approach and he really made everybody feel comfortable, but also put them in a position to succeed, which is very different than from what we've seen in the recent past. But my team MVP is James Bradbury. I wanted to be a little bit different, so I picked a player for this one. James Bradbury, in my opinion, was just such a focal point for them this year. This is the first year of his 3-year contract with the Giants, so now he has 2 years left. He's 27 years old. The guy had an absolute monster year, 54 combined tackles. He had 3 interceptions, 2 forced fumbles, 18 passes defended, which was a career high. The guy was just all over the place, making plays over and over and over again. He didn't have a game where he let up more than 70 yards, and that game came in week 1 against Pittsburgh. So the guy was just an absolute stud. The last 3 games of the season, he didn't allow more than 23 yards. And over the last, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, over the last 7 games of the season, in 6 of them, he didn't allow 23 yards or more, which is freaking insane. He looked just absolute like a monster. And now, having that cornerback 1 position filled and figured out, it gives the Giants a lot more leeway to say, maybe we go for a pass rusher in the second round or first round. We don't need to go for Caleb Farley, or we don't need to go for Patrick Surtain. We can make different moves now because we have our guy in James Bradbury. We just need a CB2, whether it's a veteran on a free agent deal or it's a guy in a mid-round pick, maybe Darnay Holmes, Julian Love. They can make the transition to the outside corner and really hold it down. Yet to be seen. But James Bradbury, in my opinion, solves so many issues. And he's a second-round pick, so you can get quality players past the first round. We saw Xavier McKinney. He came on in Week 17. He looked really good. So I'm pretty excited about what he's capable of doing for this defense. James Bradbury, he's a leader. He's quiet. He's humble. He's a guy. He's like Eli Manning for me of the defense. He's quiet and he really shows by example. That's what I really like about James Bradbury. He's not vocally trying to make people feel bad about not making a play. He's quiet. He shows everybody how good he is by his product on the field. And it's no talk, all play for him. And I love that about his style. And it brings the best out of everybody else because it's a very professional way of going about things. And I think that's exactly what Joe Judge wanted in his players, his free agent signings and draft picks this last offseason. So he's my team MVP. Anthony, who is your most overrated?
All right, before I get to the most overrated, I'll say, though, about James Bradbury, what more can you say? Like, I can't add that much because you pretty much hit it all, and there's really not a lot of negatives to say about James Bradbury. He was phenomenal this season. He was constantly shutting down opposing wide receivers, and the one thing that I'll add, though, is if you looked at this team, the one game that he was absent, the secondary just got shredded. So in terms of most valuable player, yeah, he is very valuable to the Giants' defense because when he wasn't there, when he had COVID, the defense was just falling apart. Nobody could guard anybody. So, James Bradbury, very important. But now, moving on to most overrated. Now, Giants fans, I'm going to sell you a bridge. Shane Lemieux is not the next Marshall Yanda. Shane Lemieux is not that good, okay? Like, Shane Lemieux is a rookie. So for being a rookie, he did show some good things, some promising things. he's not a starting guard right now. He was a starting guard. He was playing as a starting guard, but he's not a starter. He's not a starting level talent right now, and he's not supposed to be. He's a 5th-round pick. I didn't expect him to come in there and actually play well, and I don't think that he did. But I think everybody just kind of, I think almost by coincidence, the rest of the offensive line started to play better. I just think he's a better scheme fit, so the offensive line started to play better. So everybody assumed Shane Lemieux was playing really well. Shane Lemieux was doing pretty good things here and there in the run blocking scheme. He was a pretty decent run blocker. He is a terrible pass protector. He was awful in pass protection. So many just quick wins for defensive linemen. Like literally as soon as the rep begins, he loses. So many of those. He was literally like, if you go to Pro Football Focus, he was the lowest graded guard in the NFL. And if you actually go and you watch the film about it, like you can see why. Because the running game is, of course it's important, and blocking is so important for the running game. But the passing game, if you can't pass protect, you are going to kill your team. Your team is just going to fall apart offensively if you can't pass protect. And he can't pass protect. And there was a lot of times where there was pressure right up the middle, right in Daniel Jones's face because of Shane Lemieux. He just is so bad in pass protectors. So I think he's the most overrated. I think he's a good player, a young player with a lot of room to grow, and I think that he will grow, and I think eventually he can be a starting level player, but right now he just isn't that, and I think Giants fans are overrating him just because we're not exactly sure what good offensive line play looks like.
That's completely fair. I get the Shane Lemieux cons and whatnot, but I do think there is upside for him. He fits Jason Garrett's run scheme well, and I think that's why they played him predominantly this past year, because the offense was so inept when it came to throwing the football. They were relying so much on the running game, and he was really, really a really improved player over Will Hernandez based on the scheme that they were running. They used a lot of trap guards, pulling guards, and he was just faster and more athletic than Will Hernandez to get the job done. So that's why I think Will Hernandez earned some more pass protection reps than Shane Lemieux. But again, you need to have a guy that does both. You can't be giving up tons of pressure like that. He did have some good reps, but like you said, he was beat way too often and his technique was just off. But offensive linemen usually take their biggest jump from year 1 to year 2. So I really do think that we'll see a better player if they do decide to roll with him as their left guard or right guard, whatever it might be, in year 2. So we'll see what happens there, but I do agree. I think he was really overrated by most of the fan base. He didn't play that well as a pass protector, and that's really bad for a guy like Daniel Jones, who was injured and needed to stand in the pocket. So that really, really hurt his production as well. For my most overrated player, I picked Darius Slayton this year because I had such high expectations for Darius Slayton, and it was really disappointing to see him really throw up a dud. Whether it was due to injury or just teams figured out that he's really just predominantly a speed guy, and if you shut down that aspect of his game, you can kind of take him out of the system. And they really had their cornerback 1s, cornerback 2s marking him and Sterling Shepard, and I just don't think he was capable of running good enough routes. Maybe the route concepts weren't good by Jason Garrett, which I also do blame him a lot for. But his statistic this year, I'll read him off for you. He had 751 yards, so that's actually more than 2019, his rookie season, but he only started 9 games in 2019, so he played less snaps, and he had 5 less touchdowns this year, mainly because he wasn't targeted downfield enough and he wasn't getting open, and he missed a couple of deep balls. There was one throw from Daniel Jones that he launched like 50 yards downfield, and Darius Slayton just didn't get to it. It was a perfect throw. He just dropped it. He just was like an inch away. And that's that extra burst that we usually see him have. That's why I think he might have been injured. But I think based on our expectations for him this year and the fact that he did play through the injuries and the fact that he did play at all, I'm going to put him in the overrated category just because I don't think he lived up to our expectations, and that was really the main point for me. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think in terms of Darius Slayton, I think you could say he was most disappointing, or you can maybe say he was most overrated. The problem is I think a lot of Giants fans still believe he can be this number 1 wide receiver and really think that he's going to be this amazing wide receiver too. I think he will be a good wide receiver too. I don't think he's going to be a dominant wide receiver too. I think he's going to be good, and you can get by with him. But honestly, we've gone over a couple scenarios in our recent videos and podcast episodes where we're talking about what if the Giants actually signed Kenny Golladay and then double dipped and drafted Devontae Smith as well? Well, then you have Darius Slayton's wide receiver 3 or 4, and it's he would absolutely kill that role. He's so overqualified for that role. That's when you start to see him dominate in a role. I don't think you're going to see him dominate as a number 1 or number 2 wide receiver, and I think a lot of Giants fans are still holding out hope that he will be able to do that. You have to keep in mind, Darius Slayton was a 5th round pick. So as as much as he's exceeded our expectations and as good as he's been for the Giants in this role, how much better do you really think he can be? He was a fifth round pick. I'm a big Darius Slayton fan. I love Darius Slayton. And I hope that I'm wrong about this. I hope he goes on to be a wide receiver one for us and just dominate, put up 100 yards a game. It's just, I don't think that's going to happen, but, and I don't think the Giants think that's going to happen either, considering they promised to go get offensive playmakers. They clearly don't see that ceiling for Darius Slayton either. So maybe if the Giants, like management, doesn't see the ceiling, then why do all of the fans see the ceiling? That's why I think he is kind of a little bit overrated. But, I still do think that he's a great player. It's not to, bash Darius Slayton. He is a good player. He's just, he's not what fans think he is, probably.
That's reasonable. I think that there was one point where I saw him as, a top guy that could be a number one, maybe even a fringe number one. But all those expectations just fell to the floor this past year. I do think if they do go out and find a wide receiver one, whether it's in the draft or free agency, it's going to make everybody look better. And with Saquon coming back, there's going to be times where like Darius Slayton is going to get those deep shots and he's going to get them. He's going to secure those passes. It's just his nature of his game. He makes some really nice catches. He made a couple one-handers this past year. So I have to say, like, their potential is there, and we've seen him do spectacular things. It's just not consistent, and that's the big difference between good and great teams. The consistency. You can't just disappear in a big game or even in a mediocre game against a crappy opponent. You need to show up every single week. So that's why I think Darius Slayton probably was the most overrated player this year. That doesn't mean by any means that I think he's going to be a failure. He can't develop. He can't have a bounce-back season. But just this season, I think he was the most overrated. So what are you thinking about most underrated?
For the most underrated, I'm going to go with a surprise pick here. I think a lot of Giants fans might not agree with me on this, but I'm going to go with Julian Love. I think Julian Love is very underrated for one specific reason. It's not because he's such a great player and nobody thinks he's a great player. Julian Love is just a really good depth piece, and I think that's really underrated. I think a lot of fans don't realize the value in having a guy who can go out there and give you starting level football at 3 different positions and is a backup. Like he is a backup. He plays behind Jabril Peppers, Logan Ryan, and Xavier McKinney now too. He is like, pretty much pushed down the depth chart a little bit, but he's also the backup cornerback, the backup slot cornerback, the backup strong safety, backup free safety, and occasionally the backup money backer. The guy lines up everywhere. He does it all. He doesn't do it all at like some extremely, elite talented rate. He's not like, dominating the game, but he's doing things that we need him to do, and he's always there, and he gives you solid football, and I think that's really underrated, just the value of having a guy who can play multiple positions and be such a great depth piece, because instead of having like 4 different guys play these backup roles, you have this utility player in Julian Love who can play all these roles and fill in for players if they're injured or if they have COVID or whatever. He can step in and give you some solid football, and I think that's really valuable.
That's exactly right. Julian Love is one of my favorite players for the Giants because he can do so many different things. He can play free safety, strong safety, play in the box, play cornerback, play slot cornerback. And that's what you want. You want a jack of all trades as your primary depth piece. And he went in there and played cornerback very valiantly, in my opinion, this past year in Week 16, Week 17, to fill in for some injuries. And really just as a guy, I'm not playing well. I thought Love looked pretty good in Week 17. He did his job. He got it done. He almost had an interception. He has to work on catching the ball. But for the most part, I was pretty impressed. And I think that giving him an opportunity to earn starting reps at CB2 next year would be in their best interest. They're going to bring in somebody else to compete against him and probably a couple other guys. But they have seen Sam Beal coming back as well. But Julian Love, man, really, really love him as a player, pun intended. And I think that he is capable of being, just that premium depth piece that you love to have, because injuries always happen in the NFL, and having a player that can go and supplement them is huge, so valuable. We see it with the best teams in the NFL. They always have somebody who can fill those roles at least in an average, adequate level, and Julian Love can get it done. My most underrated player is Dexter Lawrence, because I feel like he gets a lot of like hidden production. He kind of hides behind the big guys in Leonard Williams and Dalvin Tomlinson. Personally, that's how I feel. We're always talking about Williams and his sack numbers, 11.5 sacks. Dalvin Tomlinson, he's really our elite run defender. But Dexter Lawrence had, low-key, a fantastic season. And I'll tell you why. He was double-teamed more than both Leonard Williams and Dalvin Tomlinson. He was actually one of the most double-teamed interior defenders in the NFL. So that tells you a lot about how much attention he gains from opposing offenses. And you got to keep in mind, he's a 6'4", 342-pound mammoth of a person. So the guy is huge. And, I really think that if they do decide to let a guy like Dalvin Tomlinson walk, Dexter Lawrence is a great person to say, we're going to give you the extra reps. Go see what you can do with them. I think he's going to do a fantastic job if they go that route. He finished last season with 4 sacks, 53 combined tackles, 10 quarterback hits, 6 tackles for a loss, measly 3.6% missed tackle rate. The guy doesn't miss tackles. Just doesn't happen. 16 pressures. And he played just 60% of defensive snaps. So if they ask him to play a more predominant role moving forward, I am more than confident he's going to be able to replicate the production that Dalvin Tomlinson produced this past year. And also the Giants will probably go out and find a big run stuffer. We talked about a couple guys in the past videos. Alan McNeil, a pass rusher, kind of a really interesting prospect that Anthony loves, that can play that pass rusher out of the 0-and-1 technique, which is super interesting because you don't find those very often. Or you can go for a guy like Tommy Tagai from Ohio State. He's a really elite run-stuffing prospect. He's a guy you bring in, not going to create much pressure and collapse the pocket, but he's kind of like Dalvin Tomlinson, who can play 0-1 technique, just soak up double teams and play the run. That's what you draft a guy like that for. But, yep, Dexter Lawrence is my underrated guy. I think he just really produces just hidden production all over the place. Like I mentioned before, the double teams are huge for those big guys in the interior, and you don't really know that until you see the statistics after the season. So that's why I think he was my most underrated. What do you think about him?
Yeah, no, I agree. I love Dexter Lawrence. I think Dexter Lawrence was phenomenal for the Giants this year in terms of soaking up double teams and, general pass rushing productivity from the 3-tech position. Having 2 3-techs that can get after the quarterback, in Leonard Williams and Dexter Lawrence is huge for a defense, and he's a handful. He's one of the biggest dudes in the NFL. He's the truest of hog mollies that there is, and he's very nimble for his size, and he makes life really difficult for opposing offensive linemen. And I'm curious to see what will happen, right? If Dalvin Tomlinson does leave in free agency, I'm curious to see, will they move Dexter Lawrence to the 0-tech, have him play more nose tackle and pass rush up the interior more, or will they continue to put him at the 3-tech position that he's already proven to be really good at? I've seen people in the past suggest that he should go to nose tackle, play that 0-tech, because I guess they think that he'd be a better fit there, and maybe he would. He is ginormous, and he is a really good run defender, so maybe he would be better there. So I'm curious to see if they do move him, even more towards the center position. But, I guess that's something that we'll see in the offseason. Dalvin Tomlinson could come back anyway. But I guess we'll move on to the next topic, or the next, I don't know, what do you call these, superlative, and let's go with the biggest disappointment. Now, Alex and I are in full agreement on who the biggest disappointment was in terms of Giants players this year, and I think all of you are as well, listening and watching this. Evan Ingram.
Don't say his name.
No. Don't say his name? I already said it. Evan Ingram was very disappointing. Go ahead.
I was going to build it up with 11 drops, 5 interceptions, 6 total turnovers. Let's get ready to rumble. Evan Ingram. That's what I was going to do.
You could just edit this if you want to, but yeah, Evan Ingram. Evan Ingram disappointed us. Clearly, you could see how enthusiastically disappointed Alex is.
Pro Bowler.
He made the Pro Bowl, but he was still a disappointment. It's like insane to me that he actually made the Pro Bowl, but still disappointed Giants fans everywhere. We were all so extremely disappointed with how he played, because we really thought we sold ourselves a bridge. We really lied to ourselves. We were like, well, Jason Garrett's coming in here. Jason Garrett's going to do this. Jason Garrett's going to do that. And one thing about Jason Garrett's offense is the tight end position is so important. The tight end is going to break out. Look at Blake Jarwin. Look at Jason Witten. Look at every tight end that's ever played with Jason Garrett. They're always Pro Bowlers. Well, yeah, I guess Evan Ingram made the Pro Bowl, but we all are very disappointed with the way that he played en route to that Pro Bowl. He had 1 touchdown this season, which is so disappointing that it's just unacceptable. How is that even possible that you make the Pro Bowl with 1, or maybe he had 2? Did he have 2? Yeah, I think he had a rushing one as well. I think he had 2 touchdowns. Whatever, doesn't matter. He didn't score a lot. He didn't do a lot. He had a lot of drops though. He had way more drops than touchdowns. We all know that for a fact. So, and he was the cause of a lot of turnovers. He even had a fumble, and he had a lot of dropped passes land in the hands of defenders. He was just, at times, he really played like a liability. And at other times, he was phenomenal, and he looked really good. I think about the Bengals game where he was just a deep threat, and he was just making every catch, and he just looked insanely good, right? So it's disappointing because we know Evan Ingram has that ceiling. That we saw that against the Bengals. You know, we've seen him play really good football before, but we just don't see it enough. And he mixes in with so much bad football. He just can't get out of his own way. We talk about his confidence and how we think that his confidence has really taken a hit and it's really affected his performance. All of that stuff, like, it's just disappointing. And I would like to see Evan Ingram hopefully take a step forward next season. If he stays with the Giants, I want to see him improve. I want to see him be the player that we know he can be. And if not, we'll continue to be disappointed, and I'm sure the Giants will too, and they'll consider moving on. But I do really see a bright future for Evan Ingram if he can just get out of his own way. But 2020, that was a disappointing season, in my opinion, for Evan Ingram.
I mean, we all know, like, I was having a great day before we had to talk about this. We did a 45-minute video on Evan Ingram's drops and mistakes. If you really want to go torture yourself, it was torture for us. If you really want to do that to yourself, please go watch it. It'll really ruin your day, I promise. But when it comes to Evan Ingram, I really do believe he has the talent to be a phenomenal player. We all know he does. I just think he's, like Anthony said, he's in over his head. Too much mental distress is the way I would put it. He just doesn't have the confidence after making a mistake to bounce back. You know, that's what we see, his head hanging. We see just bad body, you know, just the image is just not good. You know, whenever we see him on the bench, he's always had his head hanging. He's sulking. I missed this play. You got to bounce back. If you're a professional athlete, you have to bounce back from making bad plays. That's how it goes. You drop a ball. If any sport, it doesn't have to be, you know, just football. Think about it. If you're a baseball player, you strike out, you come back the next one, you have to forget about that strikeout. You got to go for a home run. You got to go for a base hit. You got to do what you got to do. You know, that it takes, being a professional athlete, especially a very good one, takes a lot of mental strength.
Right, and that's what I was saying the other day about, I don't remember which video this was that we said this, but that's what I was saying about, like, Eli Manning, and I think this is actually a really funny, anecdotal way to make this analogy, right? When Eli Manning would throw an interception, it didn't affect him. He like, didn't even care. He would just shrug his shoulders, walk off, go back out there, throw an interception that was somehow 10 times worse, shrug it off, go out there, throw a game-winning touchdown. That was Eli Manning. The confidence was just never broken. You know, he was always just steady, calm, and led by example, and he didn't let anything get to him. And, Eli Manning's a special, unique person. You know, like, we'll never see another Eli Manning. He was such a great individual. And so it's kind of hard to, like, compare Evan Ingram to Eli Manning, you know, because this guy is on a huge, like, high up pedestal, and then it's Evan Ingram. So, but still, I'd like to see more Giants players in general just have more of a mentality of don't get your confidence shaken. You make a mistake, whatever, move on, go out there and fix it.
Yeah, and before I move on from Evan Ingram, I do want to add one last thing. I do believe if they do get Saquon Barkley back to 100%, fully healthy, if they do get another wide receiver, it's going to take a lot of pressure off Evan Ingram. I think he took a lot of that pressure and expectation upon himself after Saquon went down. He wanted to be the premier playmaker. He wanted to be the guy. And I just think he was making those mistakes, and he just kept getting at himself mentally. So hopefully, you know, by the graces of the football gods, Evan Ingram can return to full, you know, form and really show us that he's capable of being the player that we know he can be. But as of right now, I'm not sold, not even close. So we got to see a really freaking amazing season from him next year for me to feel as though we can actually extend him on a long-term deal. Because right now, I'm not even considering that. But, yep, Evan Ingram's most disappointed. Most improved, Anthony. What are you thinking about your most improved player?
Yeah, most improved player, I'm going to go with Nick Gates. Nick Gates is a player that I was really high on going into last offseason because he played really well down the stretch in limited snaps last season as a reserve, a backup stepping in. He played really well, and I was excited about him. And then they moved him to center, and I was like, okay, well, let's see how that goes. It was a shaky start, but throughout the course of the year, he really improved, and he became a quality player by the end of the year, and he still has room to grow. So in terms of his improvement, I know most improved is supposed to be from one year to the next, and I do think we saw that. I think he is a better player this year than he was last year. He improved, but maybe he wasn't as impressive because he was still learning a new position. But in terms of improving throughout the season, well, we really saw that from Nick Gates. We really saw a guy who was struggling and looked like he wasn't going to be able to compete at the center position. But we heard, they were going to continue to improve and stick with him, keep him at the center position. And they did it. They stuck with him. And now by the end of the year, we're looking at Nick Gates. We're looking at the offensive line. And it seems like everyone's pretty confident we have our center on the roster. And he's already starting for us. Like Nick Gates seems like he solidified himself as a starting center in the NFL this season. I think that's really impressive. And I think that's really exciting, knowing that we have coaches that can develop players like that on this staff. And knowing that we have players that can develop that way. And we know that he has even more room to grow and will continue to develop and continue to improve as the most improved player this year, in my opinion.
Nick Gates is a freaking hog molly, man. That's the best way I can describe Nick Gates. He's the quintessential Dave Gettleman hog molly. I'm going to punch you in the nose for every second I'm on the field. When you watch his tape, you just see him hitting people. After the play, before the play, all he does is hit people, and that's what you want from your guys. He doesn't get penalties, though. He doesn't get those personal fouls. He actually just plays football aggressively, and he does all the little things right. When you watch him play, he had a few tough games in the beginning of the year. Yes, it was his first time ever playing center. The fact that he was able to adapt from playing right tackle, right guard to center is freaking insane. That is one of the hardest things for a guy to do. And mind you, he was an undrafted player. So talking about a steal, that is a steal if I've ever seen one. And Nick Gates is capable of being one of the best centers in the NFL. I fully believe that. After this past season, seeing his growth week in and week out, he played every single snap for the most part. He was an absolute monster, and I want to see him continue to play there and really dominate that position. And it helps out those guards a lot, When you have a young guard like Shane Lemieux, having Nick Gates there to help is really beneficial. So, Spencer Pulley, John Halapio, we've seen them both struggle in the past. And, I'm kind of on the Nick Gates train. We called it like way before the season. We thought he would pan out, and he did. So this is a pretty good prediction on our part. I know you guys all thought the same as well. So good for you guys, whoever called Nick Gates a center. Give yourself a tap on the back. But for my most improved player, I am going with Jabril Peppers, because Jabril Peppers showed me this year he can be a long-term solution at strong safety. And Jabril Peppers, in my opinion, he's been moved around a couple times to free safety when he was with the Browns, and he made his transition to strong safety. It's been a kind of a weird thing for him. But I think he took a really big step forward this past season. He had a career high in combined tackles with 91, career high in tackles for a loss with 8, career high in solo tackles with 57, career high in sacks with 2.5, career high in passes defended with 11. I mean, what else did he have here? He had a career low of a 9.9% missed tackle rate. The guy was an absolute stud in every portion of the game, and he only played he played in 15 games actually, but he was injured for a couple of them. He picked up an ankle injury in the middle of the season, so he was playing injured too. So tough as nails, Jabril Peppers. Love him as a player. I love his energy. I love what he brings to the defense. He's a leader. He's a good guy to have in the locker room. He makes everybody around him better, and I think he's only getting better. And that's thanks to great coaching, by the way. I don't want to say Jabril Peppers is a product of just time. He is a product of fantastic coaching from Patrick Graham and these defensive back coaches, these safety coaches. Just an absolute fantastic all-around effort to make Jabril Peppers an even better player this past season. He's so young at 25 years old. They've already picked up his fifth-year option. They have him for 2021, and I think he's going to have a really, really great season as long as he stays healthy, and we're going to see the Giants try to extend him long-term, and he's not going to make as much as Landon Collins is going to make, so I'm pretty happy about that, because I think Landon Collins really was so consistent over the course of his rookie deal that he actually, like, I guess you could say he earned the money, but nobody was willing to pay him but Washington. Now it's not really looking like a good deal. But Jabril Peppers, I think this is the first season he really showed that promise, that potential. And now I'm sitting here like, I think he's the future at strong safety, and we're not going to have to pay him maximum deal like Landon Collins got. But what do you think about Jabril to wrap up this video?
Yeah, I think Jabril Peppers as most improved player is a really good selection because, I remember going into this season, we were talking about, okay, if the Giants suck this year, like what's going to happen? Who could we trade? Who could we consider moving on from? A lot of people did mention Evan Ingram at the beginning of the season, and they're mentioning him even more at the end of the season. But a name that was thrown around a little bit was Jabril Peppers. People felt like he really didn't live up to the expectations when he first got here. Really didn't seem like that great safety that we were hoping to get. Nobody thinks that now. Everybody loves Jabril Peppers. He totally won the fan base over this season. He started to win us over last year, but we were like, well, he was injured. He didn't finish the season, and he had a lot of missed tackles or whatever. This year, he really he took his game to another level. He started playing a different role in Patrick Graham's scheme. You know, Patrick Graham has very defined roles for their players, and they're really tailored to the players' strengths and weaknesses. And Jabril Peppers in this role was just phenomenal. I think he was an excellent safety for us this year. And I'm really excited to see him continue to improve and continue to grow in this role with Patrick Graham and with the Giants defense, because he did look like a legitimate safety this year. And I don't think anybody's going to want to consider trading him away now. I'm very excited to see where Jabril Peppers continues to go in his career with the Giants.
Me too, and I think he's going to be a focal point. I think he's a guy you want to have around just for his mentality, his physicality, aggression, and his energy. You know, that energy is contagious even for the coaches. So this wraps up our accolade video. I think that these players really deserved it for the most part, even the bad ones, whether it be Evan Ingram, Darius Slayton, or whoever it might be. So I'm going to leave this exact little accolade list in the YouTube chat. On YouTube, of course. So you guys can pick your players and show us in the comments who you think deserve to be each one. Team MVP, most overrated, most underrated, biggest disappointment, and most improved. And if you guys are watching all the big games on Sunday afternoon, I hope you enjoyed. Have some time with family and friends. Obviously within the COVID standards. The most we can do at this point. But some really good football coming up. I'm really excited. I know you guys are. So we will catch you guys on the next one.